Okay, today is the 10th of August 2009 and we've come to the fourth book of the Samyutta Nikaya, starting on the fourth book. This fourth book is named after the first chapter, Salayatana Samyutta. So the book is called Salayatana Vaga, the book of the six sense bases. And this is another very important section concerning the six sense bases. And in this book, there are 10 Samyuttas, 10 chapters. And the whole book is dominated by the first chapter, Salayatana Samyutta, which takes up half of the book. In the Pali text of the Pali Text Society, this book 4 has 403 pages, and the first chapter takes up 208 pages, about half of it. Now, in this first chapter that we are going into, the Salayatana six sense bases, there are, in this translation by Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, there are 248 suttas. I'll read to you some of the important notes that Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi has written here. He says, on first consideration, it would seem that the six internal and six external sense bases should be understood simply as the six sense faculties and their objects, with the term ayatana, base, having the sense of origin or source. Though many suttas lend support to this supposition, the Theravada exegetical tradition, beginning already from the Abhidhamma period, understands the six pairs of bases as a complete scheme of classification capable of accommodating all the factors of existence mentioned in the Nikayas. So, the Theravada commentarial tradition has diverted a bit from the original suttas, and they have a slightly different interpretation. The other note to read for you is, he says, the main pragmatic concern with the six sense bases is the eradication of clinging. For like the aggregates, the sense bases serve as the soil where clinging takes root and thrives, because clinging or attachment originates from ignorance and craving, and because ignorance sustains clinging by weaving its web of the triple delusion, permanence, happiness, and self. We find in the Salayatana Samyutta almost all the familiar templates used in the Kanda Samyutta. Often, in fact, these templates are here applied twice to generate parallel suttas for the internal and external sense bases. Thus, to dispel ignorance and generate true knowledge, we repeatedly hear the same melodies in a slightly different key, reminding us that the sense bases and their derivatives are impermanent, suffering, and non-self. That we must discern the gratification, danger, and escape in regard to the sense bases. That we should abandon desire and lust for the sense bases. Several suttas in this chapter identify the six sense bases with the world, because the word loka is whatever disintegrates, lojati, and because in the Noble One's discipline, the world is understood as that in the world by which one is a perceiver and conceiver of the world. In one sutta, the question is raised why the world is said to be empty, sunya, and the answer given is because the six bases are empty of a self, or of what belongs to self. No parallels to these discourses are found in the Kanda Samyutta. This Samyutta also describes the six internal sense bases as old karma, which could not be said so plainly about the aggregates, for they comprise both karmically active and resultant phases of experience. We further find here that greater stress is placed on conceiving, manana, the distorted cognitions influenced by craving, conceit and views, with several discourses devoted to the methods of contemplation for uprooting all conceivings. The entire Samyutta ends with a masterly discourse in which the Buddha urges the monks to uproot conceivings in all its guises. The Khanda Samyutta consistently treats the aggregates as the objective referent of identity view, Sakaya Ditti, the views that seek to give substance to the idea of a self. When the Putujana or worldling fashions a view about his or her identity, he or she always does so in relation to the five aggregates. We do not find any parallel text expressing identity view in terms of the sense basis. This difference in emphasis is understandable when we realize that the scheme of the aggregates spans a wider spectrum of categories than the sense bases themselves, and therefore offers the worldling more variety to choose from when attempting to give substance to the notion of myself. This, it must be stressed, indicates a difference in emphasis, not a fundamental doctrinal difference. For the sense basis can be grasped upon with the notions, this is mine, this I am, this is myself, just as tenaciously as the aggregates can. Thus we even find a series of 3 suttas which state that contemplating the sense basis as impermanent, suffering, and non-self leads respectively to the abandoning of wrong view, identity view, and view of self. However, as a general rule, the sense bases are not taken up for a thematic exposition of identity view in the way the 5 aggregates are, which is certainly significant. We see too that the entire Ditti Samyutta on the diversity of views traces all views to a misapprehension of the aggregates, not of the sense basis. In relation to the sense basis, the interest in views recedes into the background, and a new theme takes center stage, the need to control and master the senses. It is the sense faculties that give us access to the agreeable and disagreeable phenomena of the world. And it is our spontaneous, impulsive responses to these phenomena that sow the seeds of much suffering. Within the untrained mind, lust, hatred, and delusion, the 3 roots of evil, are always lying latent, and with delusion obscuring the true nature of things, agreeable objects are bound to provoke lust and greed, disagreeable objects, hatred and aversion. These spontaneous reactions flood the mind and bid for our consent. If we are not careful, we may rush ahead in pursuit of immediate gratification, oblivious to the fact that the fruit of sensual enjoyment is misery. To inculcate sense restraint, the Salayatana Samyutta makes constant use of 2 formulas. One is the stock description of sense restraint, Indriya Samvara, or sometimes it's called Indriya Gutta Dwara, guarding the sense doors, usually embedded in the sequence on the gradual training, common in the Digha Nikaya and the Majjhima Nikaya. This formula enjoins the practice of sense restraint to keep the evil, unwholesome states of covetous and displeasure from invading the mind. In the present chapter, it occurs at 35.120, 127, etc. The second formula posits a contrast between one who is intent upon a pleasing form and repelled by a displeasing form, and one who is not swayed by these pairs of opposites. The latter has set up mindfulness of the body, dwells with a measureless mind, and understands the liberation by mind, liberation by wisdom, where the evil states of lust and aversion cease without remainder. The doctrine of dependent origination reveals that craving is the propelling cause of suffering, and craving springs up with feeling as its proximate cause. Feeling occurs in the 6 sense bases as pleasant, painful, and neutral feeling. and through our unwholesome responses to these feelings, we nourish the craving that holds us in bondage. To gain full deliverance from suffering, craving must be contained and eradicated, and thus the restraint of the senses becomes an integral part of the discipline aimed at the removal of craving. Craving and other defilements arise and flourish because the mind seizes upon the signs, nimitta, and features, anubhyanjana, of sensory objects and uses them as raw material for creating imaginative constructs to which it clings as a basis for security. This process, called mental proliferation, papancha, is effectively synonymous with conceiving, manjana. These constructs, created under the influence of the defilements, serve in turn as springboards for still stronger and more tenacious defilements, thus sustaining a vicious cycle. To break this cycle, what is needed as a preliminary step is to restrain the senses, which involves stopping at the bare sensum without plastering it over with layers of meaning whose origins are purely subjective. This aspect of sense restraint receives special emphasis in the last two vagas of the Salayatana Samyutta, which stand out by reason of their startling imagery and extended similes. Here the six sense faculties are spoken of as an ocean, the sense objects as their current, and the faring along the spiritual path as a voyage in which we are exposed to dangers that we can only surmount by sense restraint. Again, agreeable sense objects are like baited hooks cast out by Mara. One who swallows them comes under Mara's control. One who resists them escapes unharmed. It is better, we are told, to have our sense faculties lacerated by sharp instruments, hot and glowing, than to become infatuated with attractive sense objects, for such infatuation can lead to rebirth in the lower realms. Our existential condition is depicted by the parable of a man pursued by 4 vipers, 5 murderous enemies, and an assassin. His only means to safety, a handmade raft. A monk in training should draw his senses inward as a tortoise draws its limbs into its shell, for Mara is like a hungry jackal trying to get a grip on him. The 6 senses are like 6 animals, each drawn to their natural habitat, which must be tied by the rope of sense restraint and bound to the strong pose of body-directed mindfulness. The Samyutta ends with a parable about the magical bonds of the Asura king Vepachiti and sounds a decisive call to eliminate all modes of conceiving rooted in craving and wrong views. So these are interesting notes the Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi has written. Now we start on the suttas themselves. We start with the first sutta 35.1. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. There, the Blessed One addressed the monks thus: "Monks, Venerable Sir," those monks replied. The Blessed One said this: "Monks, the I is impermanent. What is impermanent is suffering. What is suffering is non-self. What is non-self should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom thus: this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. The ear is impermanent. The nose, tongue, body, mind are impermanent. What is impermanent is suffering. What is suffering is non-self. What is non-self should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom thus: this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself." Seeing thus, monks, the learned noble disciple experiences revulsion towards the eye, revulsion towards the ear, revulsion towards the nose, revulsion towards the tongue, revulsion towards the body, revulsion towards the mind. Experiencing revulsion, he becomes dispassionate. Through dispassion, his mind is liberated. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge it's liberated. He understands, destroyed his birth, the holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more for this state of being.